Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Assassin's Creed. Hope you're having a happy December. Today we'll be discussing the book Alamut. But before we do that, I just want to note that the next book for us to read for the month of December is Assassin's Creed Heresy by Christie Golden. It deals a lot with the modern day Templars, and the historical aspect is focused on Joan of Arc. The people who have read it so far say it's really good, so definitely check it out. We did a giveaway a couple days ago, and so congratulations to all the winners for that. If you did not win in the giveaway, please make sure you pick up a copy of the book. We'll have a link in the video description. It's an Amazon affiliate link, which helps fund future giveaways, of course. All right, so why don't we just dive right into Alamut. I'm going to start off with the things that I liked. We'll go through likes, dislikes, and then we'll do some trivia about Alamut itself as it exists in history, and then also how it relates to the Assassin's Creed world and the connections it has with Assassin's Creed 1. So to start off, the things I like, I would just start off with the supreme Ismaili motto of nothing is true and everything is permitted. I think I was very surprised at how it was handled in this book. And surprised in the sense that it's pretty much purely focused on religion, more or less. Like, it's all about Hassan. Well, he learns it from someone else, but it always takes on this factor of realizing that religion is kind of well, the truth and as it relates to religion is unknowable, and so if there's nothing to believe in, then everything is permitted. So I've never really thought about the maxim of the creed really applying in a religious sense. It's always been a little more abstract than that and subject to interpretation. So I was really kind of affected by that, I think. So this is, if you'll allow me, like a little quick story. So this isn't something I really share very often or readily, but like I grew up in like a very religious community, brought up really religiously, and I was living in my own little bubble. This is before, the internet existed as well, so that helps insulate in these little bubbles. But when I was about in my mid-teens, it was really when I was starting to come to terms with the fact that I didn't really believe in God and religion in general. And a big part of that, of me coming to terms with that, was realizing that there were just so many religions in the world and so many devoted followers, in each one of them believing supremely that theirs was the correct religion, to the point where they would die for their religion, where they would pretty much do anything. And Hassan actually goes through almost that exact same realization. It's not, for both of us, it's not the full extent of believing in this, but it's one of the steps. And he basically realizes, like, if everybody's religion is equally true and untrue, and at that point you start to reach the higher level of the Ismaili belief system, where it says, well, nothing is true and everything is permitted. And not to say that everything is without consequence, only that your actions are held to yourself and your peers, and not really anything beyond that, no higher power than that. So it ended up being really, I identify as atheist now, and in a way it really felt like it almost became like the atheist's creed, It's kind of, it was just really surprising to me, and it kind of touched me on it affected me on a personal level in a way that I wasn't really expecting. And so I really, really enjoyed reading about this interpretation of the motto, and how it relates to the story, and especially Hassan's actions. So moving on to other things that I really enjoyed about this book, I thought Hassan himself, like his character, I thought was really, really well done and really amazing. I really like how there's these times where he'll just go on these almost maniacal rants about the motto and like what he's doing, whether it's to Miriam or to Abu Ali, or like his his commanders and everything, and they're all like kind of, they can see that he's really brilliant, but he's also a little bit like, he's so passionate and he's a little unhinged. But I also love that you also get these almost quieter moments, and where he kind of questions what he's doing, and he's not 100% sure like you can tell he feels really bad to what he's doing to the assassins, kind of deceiving them, and he intentionally distances himself so that he doesn't feel as bad when he sends them out on missions. And there's also, a loneliness to him that's really kind of affecting. And he's just a really fascinating character to me. I just really enjoyed reading about Hassan. I liked most of the characters in the book. I don't really have a lot of complaints about it. But as time went on, it became clear to me that Hassan is like kind of the real main character, so to speak, in this book. And I just really, really enjoyed him. Other things I enjoyed about this book is just, it's very philosophical. Like you can kind of, especially the things that Hassan talks about, like you can really dig down deep if you want to and start asking yourself, things like, is ignorance bliss? Or, he makes the point where, both Yusuf and Suleiman killed themselves. And to him and like his commanders, people who see like everything that's happening, like it's a very awful thing that's going on. But to them, he points out, they had the greatest night of their lives in paradise, and they went to their deaths happier than pretty much any of us will. So can you really make the case that, you can make the case either way, like, objectively, this, from an outsider's point of view, this is pretty fucking awful, but does it really matter if to them, they had a wonderful time and went to their deaths deceived but happy, as things like that. Like you can really spend a lot of time thinking about things in this book and kind of mold them over in your head. I really like that. And finally, this book made me fall in love with AC1 again in a way that I haven't really ever, not really fall in love again, but I've never really fully been in love with like AC1. It's not one of my favorite Assassin's Creeds. I only played it like almost a decade ago when it came out. I haven't replayed it since then. And this book just has so much rich history about, the region and the mindset of the assassins that I just really want to play Assassin's Creed 1 again. It made me really kind of appreciate what was going on there. All right, so we'll move on now to the dislikes of the book, some that I had. Overall, I really loved the book. Some of the things I didn't like as much, I felt like it kind of got off to a slow start, and it almost has the Assassin's Creed 3 problem, where you're setting up two protagonists at the same time, in this case with Ibn Tahar and also with Halima. Is it Helena? Halima. Whichever one it is. And it kind of, one of them is setting up the harem, or paradise actually, and the other one is setting up the day-to-day life of the assassins in the Alamut fortress. But it's almost like AC3 in a sense, where you're kind of going through the prologue to the main story twice, and so it can kind of feel, I think, just a little bit slow in the beginning and maybe overly descriptive, although that pays off later in the book, I think. Another thing that I wasn't crazy about, and this is purely just from my like cultural point of view, it was a little hard for me to follow all the names and characters of like not the main characters, but all of the many side characters. There's just so many of them, and unfortunately, I'm not familiar. It's easier for me to remember names if I encounter them day to day or if I'm familiar with them. But in this case, it was a little hard for me to keep track. And it doesn't help that there were also some shared names. Like I think there's at least 3 different Alis in this, and even a couple. I think even Jafar there's another Jafar in the palace when he goes to assassinate the Sultan. So there's some duplicated names that didn't help with that. But that's just mainly kind of more on my side. More than anything. One more dislike that I was a little surprised wasn't mentioned was I was really curious what happened after they killed Obida. You might remember he's the one who spit out his hashish tablet and did not believe he was in paradise. And so they had the Moors strangle him and bury the body beside paradise. And only the other 2 assassins came back. And I was waiting to see what kind of excuse they were going to give. They're like, "Oh, what happened to Obida? Oh, he's still in paradise," or he didn't survive the transition back, or something. I was really curious as to how they were going to try to explain that away, but they never do. It's like never mentioned to any of the assassins or like anyone else. So, just a little loose plot end that I was hoping would be tied up. Okay, so now let's move on to kind of like the trivia portion. I spent a little more time on this than usual because there's so much to cover. First, let's cover how Alamut exists in real life. Most of you probably know that the characters and setting of this is based in historical fact. Alamut was a real fortress in the Iranian region. It was destroyed in 1256 by the Mongols, and in Assassin's Creed lore, this is in retaliation for the assassination of Genghis Khan, which is part of the story of the, 6 statues beneath the Villa Auditore, where Altair's armor is. One of them is the assassin that kills Genghis Khan. And so it was actually destroyed, but it is being developed today as a tourist destination by the Iranian government because it's so steeped in history. And so at some point you might be able to visit and see most of it rebuilt, possibly. I don't know exactly what's going on there. Now, the other aspect is, since this was a real historical location and Hassan was a real character, a real person, how do they exist in the AC universe might be another thing worth talking about. So the Assassin's Creed Encyclopedia lists Hassan as one of the assassin leaders of the region. Alamut Castle is where Altair went into exile for a couple of decades. This is where he wrote most of the codex, and it's also the case that in AC lore, Alamut was built on a first Civ temple, and beneath there is where a lot of the first Civ memory seals were stored, like the blank seals. And so what happened is Altair was here in exile. He found the first Civ temple beneath, found the memory seals, and that's where he picked them up and then imprinted all of his memories on for Ezio and Assassin's Creed Revelations. Edward Kenway would eventually visit the ruins of Alamut. The lore goes that after Edward moves to England at the end of AC4, he stays there for a while, but he also goes out and kind of explores, looking for first civilization sites. And so one of the places he goes to is Alamut, the ruins of it. And then one final just little bit of trivia, Alamut is the Persian word for eagle's nest, of course, so ties in nicely into the Assassin's Creed world. And so you can kind of see Hassan and Alamut as, at the end of the book, they actually Hassan actually sends someone out to Masyaf and says, I need you to capture Masyaf, and we're going to turn that into a similar setup for here. And that's kind of the tie-in to Assassin's Creed, which, of course, mainly takes place in the fortress of Masyaf and not the fortress of Alamut. Okay, so now we get into the part where we ask, how did Alamut influence Assassin's Creed 1? And first, let's just start with if it influenced Assassin's Creed 1 and to what extent. So Jade Raymond, the producer on Assassin's Creed 1, gave an interview in 2006, so right before the game was, right after it was announced, but before it came out, with the official Xbox magazine, where she confirms that they took inspiration from the book Alamut by the Slovenian writer Vladimir Bartol. Yes, Vladimir Bartol. And so obviously there are some parts of this that are inspired by it. What is really interesting is that I reached out to Corey May, who is the lead writer of Assassin's Creed 1 as well as Assassin's Creed 2 and 3, and I was just like, hey, what do you think of Alamut? Do you have anything you want to say about it? Turns out Corey has not actually read Alamut, which is kind of crazy to me. But basically, the English translation for this book came out in around 2005, and they were already pretty deep into production on Assassin's Creed 1. Remember, it took 4 or 5 years to make the game. But I think this is my interpretation of what happened, is that there was a French translation that came out in 1998, I believe. And so I think it's very likely that Patrice and or Jade or other people on the team read it, got some initial ideas, pulled some things from it, and then, when Corey was brought into production as lead writer, they had already kind of established the framework. That's my guess anyway. But so it's a little hard to tell exactly. Corey himself didn't draw anything from Alamut, but maybe some of the framework was set up. And by the way, we did get some book recommendations for the book club from Corey, so we'll be definitely checking some of those out in the future. But let's just run through kind of the similarities of Alamut and AC1. On a very base level, Hassan is to Al-Mualim as Ibn Tahir is to Altair. Those two things match up pretty nicely as mentor and assassin. The last half of Alamut lines up pretty nicely, at least Ibn Tahir's journey lines up pretty nicely with some aspects of Assassin's Creed 1's plot. So, on a very base level, Ibn Tahir assassinates a target who doesn't die right away, and kind of, as he's being poisoned, gives a speech that's very similar to the ones in the White Rooms that Altair gets in the memory corridor, while the poison is taking effect and killing him. And in both the the memory corridor speeches and with Ibn Tahir's target, they both question like his motives and his ideology. Having had his ideology challenged, Ibn Tahir goes back to his mentor, just this, like the same way that Altair goes back to Al-Mu'alim at the end and kind of challenges him. The difference between Alamut and Assassin's Creed 1, of course, is that in Alamut, Ibn Tahir and Hassan reconcile, and Ibn Tahir goes off like in search of knowledge, whereas, of course, in AC1, Altair kills Al-Mu'alim. But then kind of also goes off on his own little, like, I'm going to learn more about the world and everything about it. Another thing that's very similar is the way that Yusuf dies by given a command to demonstrate his faith by, like, killing himself and throwing himself off a building in order to kind of startle the enemy, is very similar to a moment early on in Assassin's Creed 1 where Al-Mu'alim asked the assassins to make a similar leap of faith, of course.
Your village lays in ruins, and your stores are hardly endless. How long before your fortress crumbles from within? How disciplined will your men remain when the wells run dry and their food is gone?
My men do not fear death, Robert. They welcome it, and the rewards it brings.
Good. Then they shall have it all around.
Follow me, and do so without hesitation.
Show this fool knight what it is to have no fear. Go to God! Oh, my leg! Ah!
Okay, and finally, another thing that's worth noting that I thought was really interesting is that according to Pierre Belec in Assassin's Creed Unity, before Altair came along, the assassins really did operate in a manner similar to how Alamut portrays them.
And if all other plans fail, why not sacrifice yourself for the cause, your life for his? Before Altair, that was the Levantine approach.
You mean a dagger in broad daylight as I'm cut down where I stand?
Sends a powerful message.
I'll do it my way.
Whatever you think best, assassin.
So basically, I think what Belec is implying here is that once Altair came along, he kind of allowed for the ability to run away. After you might, like, the idea is you still might assassinate your target in broad daylight, but afterwards, you don't have to give your life for it. You can just escape. And I thought this is actually kind of it's an interesting idea because it doesn't, to me, the one ideology doesn't flow very naturally into this next Altair version of it, because the original idea is that if you're willing to sacrifice your life, that opens up assassination opportunities that would otherwise not be available to you, like assassinating the Sultan in his court, like they do in Alamut. Like, there's no way to run away from that, and so the only way to really get that assassination, make that assassination available to you, is if you're willing to die. And so I think it kind of undermines the entire structure of the initial way of assassinating if you say, oh, you can run away, because the whole idea is you want to die, right? You want to go to paradise. And so I think it's a really interesting tidbit that they threw in there, but I think once you start to think about how you would transition from the former Levantine approach to the post-Altair Levantine approach of assassination, it's not just as simple as, oh, now you can escape. You'd have to rethink the whole fundamental like kind of ideology of the assassins in order to do that. So I thought that was something that was worth noting and kind of thinking about. Okay, so finally, one or two more pieces of trivia. So the Supreme Ishmaeli motto, nothing is true, everything is permitted. I think it's probably safe to say that this is one of the things that Assassin's Creed 1 took from the Alamut book. And you also may or may not have noticed, especially if you listen to my podcasts, that the Creed's maxim, which is the same thing, nothing is true, everything is permitted, has been very noticeably absent from pretty much everything Ubisoft related since 2013. So it makes an appearance in Assassin's Creed 4. It's like a big part of that game as far as like Edward's character development. But you don't see it anywhere in Unity. You don't see it anywhere in Syndicate, Chronicles, the movie. So this is just rumblings that I've heard like kind of secondhand. So don't take this for truth. But from what I have kind of heard here and there, it seems very likely that this is the result of kind of legal conflict between the owners of the rights to Alamut and Ubisoft, resulting in not being able to use the phrase in the last few years, which, like, on one hand, I think is absolutely fucking ridiculous. This novel was written in 1938. Like, it's insane to me that there's still kind of like a copyright over this. It speaks to a lot about our broken copyright system, in my opinion. It should be in the public domain, in my opinion. But it's also just really kind of sad to me. And I've had people in the past say, oh, Loomer, it's just a couple lines of, it's like a sentence, who cares if it's there or not? To which I say, you should absolutely care, because it's the fundamental, like, I don't know, kind of, it's just really, some of my favorite moments in Assassin's Creed come from examining the maxim of the creed, and that includes Ezio explaining to Sophia the creed at the end of Revelations, and like I said, it's a huge part. Edward's understanding of the creed in Assassin's Creed 4 and how that changes is a big part of his character development. And so it makes me really sad that it's just kind of disappeared and is likely due to these legal issues. In fact, the first time, it was just a few days ago that the Assassin's Creed movie Twitter and Facebook both posted nothing is true, everything is permitted, along with like kind of a short gif of Aguilera kind of like looking at the camera. I was super surprised and excited to see this, but I think it's very telling that just a couple days later they deleted the tweet, and if you look at the post on Facebook, it has been edited to say something else now, like stealth, secrecy, and I don't know, success. I forget. I'd have to look at it again. But this is another thing that I just thought I'd bring up, and like I said, don't take it as 100% truth. It's kind of just a rumor, but I thought it was worth mentioning and be worth thinking about, I think. All right, and one last final piece of trivia here. Alamut actually makes a prominent appearance in the Prince of Persia Sands of Time movie. And those of you, especially if you've seen me play Prince of Persia, know that, there's very strong ties between the Sands of... It was basically the Sands of Time team that went on to make Assassin's Creed 1. And so in the Prince of Persia movie, Alamut is the location of the Sands of Time, and the Princess Tamina, who joins up with the prince for the rest of the movie.
The fabled Alamut. Even more stunning than I'd imagined.
Don't be fooled by beauty, Prince Toss. It's a city like any other.
Soft countries make soft men. They stoop to treachery and now must pay for it.
My father's made clear Alamut's not to be touched. Some consider it sacred.
And it's also kind of interesting, the movie depicts the Assassins, aka the Hashashin, aka assassins, although they're a little different from what you and I are used to as far as their depiction goes. All right, now before we leave, I just want to start this new segment where we're going to talk about, I'm just going to bring up a couple highlights of previous discussions from last month's book that I thought really kind of stood out. So this is from the Assassin's Creed Last Descendants discussion in November. One comment that I thought was really, that I was glad was brought up that we hadn't talked about is from Olorin Elior, and apologize if I butchered the pronunciation of that name, as well as any of the names from Alamut. But that person said, it was written a little bit too childish for my taste. There's nothing wrong with that. I even expected it to be that way. It just felt that way for me. And I thought this was interesting because it was something I hadn't brought up in the Last Descendants discussion, but this is Ubisoft's first foray into the young adult novel kind of space. And so it is written to a slightly different audience than something like the Oliver Bowden books or the graphic novels necessarily. It's written to a different audience. It's written in a slightly simpler way. And so I thought that was interesting to bring up. Now, there's nothing wrong with young adult novels. Some of like the best stories like Harry Potter and, you know, like The Hobbit are considered young adult novels. It's just a different genre and style of writing. Now, another comment that I found interesting from the Last Descendants discussion is from Ruari M, who says, I think one of the things that stood out for me was Monroe's stance in the whole conflict. Monroe, of course, is the one who has the van with the Animus in it and who brings all the children together in order to experience the things. He says, I spent the first couple of chapters trying to figure out whether he was an assassin or Templar and found it refreshing he doesn't relate to either and is just trying to protect people from their war. And he goes on to note that he still aligns with the assassins a little more because he's, when it comes to Pieces of Eden, because he's just trying to hide them from both sides. He doesn't share their bigger ideals. And so I thought that was a really interesting note about Monroe that it hadn't really come up in the main discussion for it. So like I said, in the future, I have plans to tie these kinds of comments to giveaways or other cool stuff. But for now, it's stay tuned for that. It'll probably be somewhere in January when that actually happens. But for now, it's just my way of sharing some interesting tidbits that came up from the previous discussion. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you all enjoyed Alamut. So I'll see you next month, January 1st, New Year 2017. Don't forget to pick up Assassin's Creed Heresy because that's what we'll be discussing on January 1st. Check out the video description for an Amazon link if you need to pick up a copy. All right, see you all later. Have a good December. Bye. Oh, another interesting comment that I found in the discussion is from Ruari.